The air tasted stale in the lower decks of the Hyperion. Alan Brooks wiped sweat from his forehead as he tightened the last bolt on the climate control unit. The ship hummed around him, a constant companion during the long, quiet hours of his maintenance shifts. Brooks, report to the command deck immediately. The voice of Captain Frank Donovan crackled through his communicator, unusually tense. Alan frowned. In his 3 years aboard the research vessel, he had been called to the command deck exactly twice, once when he first boarded, and once when the main reactor nearly failed during an asteroid field crossing. Neither occasion had been pleasant. "My way, Captain," he replied, gathering his tools. The corridors were buzzing with activity as Alan made his way upward. Crew members rushed past him, faces tight with excitement or fear. Alan couldn't tell which. He caught fragments of conversations as he passed. Just appeared out of nowhere. Never seen technology like that. First contact, the command deck doors slid open, revealing organized chaos. Officers moved between stations with purpose while the main view screen showed an image that made Alan stop in his tracks. A ship hung in the darkness of space before them. It looked nothing like human vessels. Where the Hyperion was all industrial angles and functional design, this ship resembled a crystalline structure, as if someone had grown a massive, perfect gemstone in the vacuum of space. It glittered with internal light that pulsed in patterns, that seemed almost alive. "Ah, Brooks. Good." Captain Donovan gestured him over. "Your timing is excellent. Our visitors have just requested permission to come aboard." Alan blinked. "Sir? I'm just here to fix the climate controls. I'm not sure why you'd need me for a diplomatic—" "The climate controls are fine." Donovan cut him off. That was an excuse. "Security protocol. We're bringing you in because you're the best systems analyst we have, and I want someone watching our backs in case our guests try anything with the ship's computers." Before Alan could process this new information, the communications officer called out, "Captain, they're transmitting docking protocols now. Accept and prepare the main hangar," Donovan ordered. He turned to Alan. "I want you monitoring all systems during this meeting. Anything unusual, power fluctuations, unauthorized access attempts, anything, you alert security immediately. Clear?" "Yes, sir," Alan replied, moving to a secondary console. The next hour passed in a blur of preparation. Security teams took positions throughout the ship. Scientists prepared first contact protocols. The medical team stood by in case of biological contamination. And Alan sat at his station, watching the ship's systems, feeling very much out of place in what was clearly a historic moment. When the aliens finally entered the command deck, the room fell silent. They were tall, at least 7 feet, and vaguely humanoid in shape. But any similarity to humans ended there. Their bodies appeared to be made of the same crystalline material as their ship, semi-transparent and refracting light in mesmerizing patterns. Where a human would have facial features, they had what looked like a smooth, featureless plane that occasionally rippled with internal light pulses. "I am Zethka," the foremost alien said, its voice somehow both inside Alan's head and in the air around them. "Speaker for the Zelrani Federation. We greet the people of Earth and its colonies." Captain Donovan stepped forward, shoulders square. "Captain Frank Donovan of the Earth research vessel Hyperion. We welcome you in peace." The formal introductions continued, but Alan found his attention split between monitoring the ship's systems and stealing glances at the aliens. Their movements were fluid, yet precise, as if they calculated each gesture. Then, without warning, one of the aliens, not Zethka but a slightly smaller figure, turned directly toward Alan. "This one watches," it said, light patterns shifting rapidly across its surface. "This one does not command or speak, yet observes intently." All eyes turned to Alan's station. He felt his face grow hot under the sudden attention. "This is Alan. Brooks," Captain Donovan explained smoothly. "One of our engineers." The alien moved toward Alan's station with a grace that seemed impossible for its size. Alan resisted the urge to push his chair back as it leaned down to examine him. "Engineer," the alien repeated as if tasting the word. One who builds and maintains. Yes, Alan said, finding his voice. I fix things when they break. The alien's surface rippled in what might have been amusement. A valuable function. In the Zelrani Federation, creation and maintenance are considered sacred duties. Alan nodded, awkwardly unsure how to respond to that. Your biological structure is fascinating, the alien continued. So soft, so impermanent. Yet you venture into the void between stars. What are you made of, engineer, that gives your kind such boldness? The question seemed philosophical rather than literal, and Alan struggled for an answer. Just doing my job, he finally said. Someone has to keep the ship running. This seemed to intrigue the alien further, but Zethka called it back to the diplomatic party with a sharp pulse of light. The meeting continued for several hours. The Zelrani explained they were explorers and traders, seeking peaceful contact with new species. They offered technological exchange and mentioned a formal alliance in the future. Throughout it all, Alan monitored the ship's systems and noticed something odd. Whenever the aliens spoke, there were faint power fluctuations in the communications grid, as if their speech itself carried energy. When the aliens finally departed, promising to return in 3 lunar cycles with formal alliance proposals, the command deck erupted in excited conversation. Humanity had made first contact, and it had gone well. Captain Donovan found Alan as he was preparing to return to his regular duties. Good work today, Brooks, he said. Did you notice anything unusual in the ship's systems? Alan reported the communications grid fluctuations. Nothing dangerous, sir, just unusual. Donovan nodded. Keep this to yourself for now, and I want you present for all future meetings with the Zelrani. Sir? Alan questioned. I'm just a maintenance engineer. That alien took a special interest in you, Donovan said. And in my experience, it's good policy to keep an eye on things that interest aliens. As Alan returned to the lower decks to finish his interrupted maintenance work, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Zelrani had seen something in him, something he wasn't aware of himself. The alien's question echoed in his mind. What are you made of? Alan didn't know the answer. But in the coming weeks, as the Hyperion continued its mission and awaited the Zelrani's return, he would find himself considering that question with increasing frequency. And when the Zelrani did return, sooner and under very different circumstances than promised, Alan Brooks would discover exactly what he was made of, whether he wanted to or not. 6 weeks passed with no sign of the Zelrani. Life aboard the Hyperion settled back into routine, though the excitement of first contact lingered in conversations throughout the ship. Alan found himself the subject of curious glances from crew, members who had heard about the alien's interest in him. He tried to ignore the attention and focus on his work. Night shift was Alan's favorite. The ship was quieter with only essential personnel on duty. He could work in peace fixing the small problems that accumulated during the day. Tonight he was deep in the maintenance tunnels, replacing worn power couplings on Deck 3. His comm unit buzzed. Brooks, you there? It was Olivia Martinez, his friend from security. Still breathing, Alan replied. What's up? Probably nothing, Olivia said, but her voice was tense. Just got some weird readings from the outer hull sensors. Thought you should check your systems. Alan frowned and pulled up the diagnostic screen on his tablet. Everything looked normal. Not seeing anything on my end. Want me to come take a look? No, stay put. Her voice cut off abruptly. Olivia? Alan tapped his comm unit. Martinez, do you copy? Silence answered him. Then, without warning, the ship's alarm system blared to life. Red emergency lights flooded the maintenance tunnel. All personnel, security alert. Unknown vessel approaching port docking bay. This is not a drill. Security teams to stations. Captain Donovan's voice sounded calm but urgent through the ship-wide comm. Alan's heart pounded in his chest. He gathered his tools and moved toward the nearest exit from the maintenance tunnels. The ship shuddered beneath his feet. Update. Unauthorized. Docking in progress. All non-security personnel remain at your stations. Alan froze. He was caught between following orders to stay put and his instinct to get to a more secure location. Before he could decide, the lights in the tunnel flickered and died, leaving only the dim red glow of emergency lighting. He heard a soft hum, like crystal glasses singing. The sound grew louder, coming from both everywhere and nowhere at once. Alan pressed his back against the wall, his tablet clutched tightly in one hand, a heavy wrench in the other. The air in front of him shimmered. 3 tall figures materialized in the narrow maintenance tunnel. Their crystalline bodies caught the red emergency lights and scattered them in eerie patterns across the walls. The Zelrani had returned. Subject Alan Brooks, the foremost alien, said, its voice bypassing Alan's ears and resonating directly in his mind. You will come with us. Alan raised the wrench defensively. I don't think so. Who are you? Where's Zethka? The speaker is waiting, another alien said. Resistance is unnecessary. The ship's comm crackled to life. Brooks, Captain Donovan's voice rang out. Where are you? We've got intruders on board. One of the aliens reached toward Alan's comm unit. Alan swung the wrench, but his arm froze, mid-motion. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. Some invisible force held him in place. We mean no harm, the alien said, removing Alan's comm unit. But we require you. Alan felt himself lifted off the ground. His body was paralyzed, but his mind raced. Where were they taking him? Why him? They moved through the ship's corridors with impossible speed. Alarms blared around them. Occasionally they passed crew members who also seemed frozen in place, trapped in whatever force field the Zelrani were generating. They reached the port docking bay. A crystalline vessel, much smaller than the one they had seen weeks ago, was attached to the Hyperion's hull. It pulsed with internal light, beautiful and terrifying. As they approached the alien vessel, Alan saw Olivia and 2 other security officers lying unconscious near the airlock. Panic surged through him. What did you do to them? He wanted to scream, but his voice remained trapped in his paralyzed throat. They are unharmed, one of the aliens answered his unspoken question. They will awaken soon. The airlock of the alien vessel opened, revealing a chamber that looked like the inside of a geode. All smooth walls with crystalline growths protruding at various angles. The Zelrani carried Alan inside. The moment they crossed the threshold, Alan could move again. He stumbled forward, nearly falling, then spun to face his captors. What is this? Why are you doing this? He demanded. All will be explained, one of the aliens said. The speaker wishes to see you. The airlock sealed. Behind them, through a small viewport, Alan could see security teams rushing into the docking bay, Captain Donovan at the lead. Their weapons were drawn, but it was too late. The ship detached from the Hyperion with a jolt. Alan was thrown to his knees as the Zelrani vessel accelerated away at impossible speed. The Hyperion shrank rapidly in the viewport until it was just a speck of light among countless others. Alan was alone among aliens hurtling through space to an unknown destination. The chamber he was in transformed around him. The crystalline growths receded into the walls, and the space expanded, becoming a room perhaps 15 feet square. A single piece of furniture, something like a chair but clearly designed for a being with different proportions, rose from the floor. Zethka entered from an opening that appeared in the wall. The alien ambassador seemed different now. The light patterns across its crystalline body were more complex, more rapid. Engineer Alan Brooks, Zethka said. I apologize for the manner of your collection. It was determined that your species might resist a formal request. Collection? Alan echoed, anger replacing fear. You kidnapped me. You attacked my ship. No attack occurred, Zethka corrected. Temporary neutralization only. No permanent damage to your vessel or crew. That doesn't make it right, Alan argued. Take me back now. That is not possible, Zethka said. You have been selected for the understanding. It is an honor few non-Zelrani receive. I don't want your honor, Alan said. I want to go home. Zethka's body pulsed with light. Home is a concept we wish to understand better. Your attachment to place, to others of your kind. These are elements of study. Alan took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. Anger wouldn't help. Study? I'm not a lab specimen. You are much more, Zethka said. You are a key. During first contact, you displayed qualities that our instrumentalities could not quantify. We must understand what humans are truly made of. And you couldn't just ask? Your Captain Donovan would not have permitted it, Zethka said. And you are not the only subject. A wall of the chamber became transparent, revealing adjacent rooms. In one, a woman with short gray hair sat cross-legged on the floor, her eyes closed. In another, a tall man with dark skin paced like a caged animal. Patricia Lee. Darius Johnson. Zethka identified them. Selected for different qualities but equally important to our understanding. Alan stared at his fellow captives, then back at Zethka. Whatever you're planning, it won't work. Humans don't respond well to being kidnapped and experimented on. Zethka's lights flickered in what might have been amusement. That response, defiance despite helplessness, is precisely what we wish to study. Rest now, Alan Brooks. The trials begin soon. Alan lost track of time aboard the Zelrani vessel. With no day-night cycle and no clocks, he could only guess that several days had passed since his abduction. The chamber where he was kept changed to meet his needs. A bed-like platform emerged from the floor when he was tired, and food appeared through openings in the wall at regular intervals. The food was bland but edible, clearly designed based on human nutritional requirements rather than taste. On what Alan guessed was the third day, the wall between his chamber and Patricia Lee's disappeared. The older woman eyed him cautiously. "So you're the other lab rat," she said. Alan nodded. Alan Brooks, engineer from the research vessel Hyperion. Patricia Lee, marine biologist from Pacific Research Station. She stepped into his chamber, looking around. "Have they told you anything about why we're here?" "Something about understanding what humans are made of," Alan replied, whatever that means. The wall to Darius Johnson's chamber also disappeared. The tall man joined them, his face set in hard lines. "Darius Johnson, former Navy SEAL," he introduced himself. "And I think we're in serious trouble." Before they could discuss further, Zethka entered the now combined chamber. 3 other Zelrani followed, their crystalline bodies pulsing with different patterns of light. "The understanding begins," Zethka announced. "You will be tested. Your responses will be measured." "Tested how?" Patricia asked. In answer, the chamber transformed around them. The walls expanded outward, and the floor beneath their feet changed, texture becoming rough and uneven. The temperature dropped rapidly. "Endurance Trial 1, a new Zelrani voice announced. "Survive." What followed was the most grueling experience of Alan's life. The chamber became a frozen wasteland. Snow and ice formed on every surface. The temperature continued to drop until Alan's breath froze in front of his face. The humans were given no cold weather gear, no shelter, no tools. "We need to move," Darius said, his military training taking over. "Generate heat, find shelter." The 3 humans huddled together, moving around the perimeter of the chamber, searching for any feature they could use for protection. There was nothing but flat ground and bitter cold. "We need to build something," Alan said through chattering teeth. He pulled off his outer shirt despite the cold. "If we all give up a layer, we can make a small shelter." Working with numb fingers, they created a small tent from their clothing. It wasn't much, but it blocked the worst of the cold. They took turns sitting outside, moving constantly to keep their blood flowing, while the other 2 warmed up inside their makeshift shelter. Hours passed. Alan's thoughts grew sluggish. His limbs felt heavy. Patricia developed a worrying blue tint to her lips. Darius, despite his military training, struggled to stay alert. Just when Alan thought they couldn't last much longer, the environment changed, again. The ice disappeared. The temperature rose rapidly, becoming uncomfortably hot. The ground beneath them turned to sand. Bright, searing light beat down from above. Desert conditions. Darius identified. "We need to conserve water and find shade." But there was no water to conserve. They had been given none, and no shade to be found in the empty chamber. Their clothing, so necessary in the cold, now became a burden in the heat. Alan's engineering mind raced. "We can make shade," he said, laying his shirt on the sand. "If we each stand on part of it, we can lift the rest with our arms to create a small canopy." The impromptu shelter provided minimal relief, but it was better than nothing. Sweat poured down their faces, their bodies rapidly dehydrating. This pattern continued for what seemed like days. The Zelrani put them through extreme heat, extreme cold, high-altitude conditions where they gasped for oxygen, and dark chambers where they could see nothing at all. Between each trial, they were given just enough time to recover: water when they were dehydrated, oxygen when they were suffocating, light when they had been in darkness. After one particularly brutal trial involving increasing air pressure that made them feel like their eardrums would burst, Alan collapsed on the floor when normal conditions were restored. "Why are you doing this?" he gasped, looking up at the observation panel where he knew the Zelrani were watching. Zethka's voice filled the chamber. "Physical limits must be established first. Your biological resilience is remarkable for such fragile forms." "We're not lab animals," Patricia protested weakly. "We're sentient beings." "Precisely why you were chosen," Zethka replied. "Animal subjects would provide insufficient data." The physical trials eventually stopped. Alan, Patricia, and Darius were given time to recover, provided with better food and comfortable resting conditions. Alan's muscles ached from exertion. Patricia had lost weight, her face gaunt. Darius maintained his composure, but a new wariness had entered his eyes. "They're softening us up for something worse," Darius said quietly as they ate together. Patricia nodded. "The physical tests are just preliminary. They want to know what we're made of on a deeper level." "I'm just a maintenance engineer," Alan said. "I fix things. I'm not special." "But you survived everything they threw at us," Patricia pointed out. "We all did. Humans adapt. Maybe that's what they're studying." The next day, or what passed for a day in their timeless prison, Zethka returned with the other Zelrani scientists. "Physical parameters established," Zethka announced. "Cognitive and emotional parameters next." The chamber walls glowed, and suddenly Alan found himself alone. Patricia and Darius had vanished. In their place stood a perfect replica of the Hyperion's engine room, the one he had been working in before his abduction. Everything was exactly as he remembered, down to the tools left on his workbench. A warning light flashed on the reactor control panel. The ship's computer announced, "Warning, coolant leak detected, reactor meltdown imminent, time to critical failure 10 minutes. Alan rushed to the panel. This was a familiar emergency scenario, one he had trained for. He knew exactly what to do, but when he tried to access the coolant system, the controls didn't respond properly. The system was different somehow. "Problem solving under pressure," Zethka's voice came from nowhere. "How will you adapt when familiar solutions fail?" Alan felt sweat break out on his forehead as he examined the altered systems. The countdown continued. 8 minutes to meltdown. 7 minutes. He had to think differently, look beyond his training. An idea struck him. If he couldn't fix the coolant system directly, perhaps he could create a bypass. He began ripping out wiring from non-essential systems, reconfiguring connections with desperate speed. 3 minutes remaining. His hands shook. If this were real, the lives of everyone aboard the Hyperion would depend on him. With 30 seconds to spare, he completed the bypass. The warning lights turned green. The countdown stopped. "Fascinating," Zethka said as the engine room simulation dissolved around Alan. "When procedures fail, you create new paths. Tell me, Alan Brooks, what are you made of that allows such adaptation?" Exhausted and angry, Alan looked up at where he thought Zethka might be watching. "If you want to know what humans are made of," he said, "you're going about it all wrong. We're not made of our responses to your tests. We're made of our choices when the tests are over." For the first time, Alan sensed surprise from the alien presence. "Explain," Zethka commanded. Alan stood straighter. "Keep pushing us. You'll find out." The cognitive tests continued for what felt like weeks. Each human faced different challenges designed to probe their minds and emotions. Patricia was forced to solve complex biological puzzles, while the simulated environment around her slowly flooded. Darius faced combat situations where the rules changed without warning, enemies becoming allies and allies becoming enemies. Alan's tests often involved broken systems that needed fixing under impossible deadlines. Sometimes the solutions were technical, requiring him to rebuild entire systems from scratch. Other times they were ethical, forcing him to choose which systems to save when he couldn't fix them all. After a particularly difficult test where Alan had to decide between restoring life support for one section of a simulated ship or communications for the entire vessel, he sat exhausted on the floor of his chamber. Patricia and Darius were returned to the common area at the same time. Patricia's hand shook and Darius had a distant look in his eyes. "They showed me my daughter," Patricia said quietly. "A perfect simulation. She was drowning, and I couldn't reach her." She pressed her hands to her face. "I know it wasn't real, but it felt real." Darius nodded grimly. "They're pushing deeper, testing our breaking points." Alan leaned against the wall. "There must be a purpose to all this. They're too methodical." "We're lab rats in a maze," Darius said bitterly. Alan shook his head. "No, it's more than that. Zethka said something about understanding what we're made of. They're looking for something." "Specific?" Patricia looked up. "Alan's right. This isn't random torture. They're scientists in their own way. They're searching for something." The wall of their chamber became transparent, revealing Zethka and several other Zelrani in an adjacent room. They appeared to be in some kind of disagreement, their crystalline bodies flashing rapidly with patterns of light. "They're arguing," Darius observed. Alan moved closer to the transparent wall. Though he couldn't hear the aliens, he could sense the tension in their movements. Zethka's pattern seemed calmer, more measured, while another Zelrani pulsed with quick, sharp flashes. The argument ended. The other Zelrani left, and Zethka approached the transparent barrier. "Your species continues to confound measurement," Zethka said. "Some among the research team believe more invasive methods are required." "What does that mean?" Patricia asked, alarm in her voice. "Physical extraction," Zethka replied. "Removal and analysis of brain tissue." Alan felt cold fear wash over him. "That would kill us." "Yes," Zethka acknowledged. "I have argued against this approach. It is wasteful and unlikely to yield the data we seek." "What exactly are you looking for?" Darius demanded. "What do you want from us?" Zethka was silent for a moment, light patterns shifting slowly across its surface. "Your species possesses something we cannot quantify, a quality that defies our instruments. We call it the consequence resonance." "The what?" Alan asked. "Your awareness of cause and effect extends beyond simple physics," Zethka explained. "You understand consequences on multiple levels simultaneously: physical, social, emotional, temporal. You make choices based on imagined futures that do not yet exist." The three humans exchanged confused glances. "That's just being human," Patricia said. "It is unique in our experience," Zethka replied. "The Zelrani consciousness functions differently. We perceive the universe as a set of absolutes. Your perception includes possibilities." Alan frowned. "And you can't do that? You can't imagine different outcomes?" "We calculate probabilities," Zethka said, "but we do not feel them as you do. We do not generate new potential realities through choice." A strange idea occurred to Alan. "Is that why you're putting us through these tests? To understand how we make choices?" "Yes," Zethka confirmed. "But some in the research team believe your ability cannot be measured, only extracted." "And you disagree?" Darius asked. "I believe destruction always yields incomplete data," Zethka said. "But I am being overruled. The final tests begin tomorrow. If they do not provide the insights we seek." The alien didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. After Zethka left, the three humans sat in grim silence. "We need to find a way out of here," Darius finally said. Patricia nodded. But how? We're on an alien ship, possibly light years from Earth by now. Alan stared at the spot where Zethka had stood. We need more information. Zethka seems different from the others, almost sympathetic. Stockholm Syndrome, Darius warned. Don't start identifying with your captors. I'm not, Alan insisted. But Zethka opposed killing us. That's something we can work with. That night, while Patricia and Darius slept, Alan noticed his chamber wall becoming slightly transparent. On the other side stood Zethka, alone. You are awake, the alien observed. Alan approached the wall. Hard to sleep when you're scheduled for brain extraction. Zethka's lights pulsed slowly. I continue to argue against that course. Your responses during testing suggest the quality we seek is not physical in nature. Then what is it? Alan asked. I believe it is emergent, Zethka said, a property that arises from the complex interaction of your biology, your experiences, and your awareness. Alan considered this. Why is it so important to you? Why go to these lengths to understand how humans make choices? Zethka was silent, for a long moment. When it spoke again, its mental voice seemed quieter, almost vulnerable. The Zelrani are dying, Alan Brooks. Our reproduction requires a form of resonance between individuals. That resonance is failing. Fewer crystals form each cycle. Our scientists believe your species holds the key to our survival. The revelation stunned Alan. You're studying us to save yourselves? Yes, Zethka confirmed. But the High Command grows desperate. They believe direct extraction from millions of humans could provide enough material to synthesize a solution. Horror dawned on Alan. Millions? You're planning to abduct millions of humans? Not abduction, Zethka corrected. The plan calls for a planetary harvest. Your Earth would be processed. Billions would provide the raw materials for our continuation. Alan felt sick. That's genocide. It is survival, Zethka said. Unless we can find another way. There has to be another way, Alan insisted. You can't just wipe out our species to save yours. The final tests may provide an alternative, Zethka said. But you should prepare yourselves. The High Command's fleet is already assembling. If the tests fail, the harvest of Earth begins in 7 days. Zethka vanished, the wall becoming solid once more. Alan stood frozen with shock. 7 days. They had 7 days before an alien fleet would begin the systematic destruction of humanity. He rushed to wake Patricia and Darius. As he shook them, awake, Alan knew that the real test was just beginning. The Zelrani wanted to know what humans were made of. Now, with the fate of Earth hanging in the balance, he and his fellow captives would have to show them. Alan, Patricia, and Darius spent hours discussing what Zethka had revealed. The fate of humanity rested on their shoulders, a weight none of them had ever imagined bearing. We need to find a way to communicate with Earth, Darius said. Warn them somehow, Patricia shook her head. Even if we could, what would they do? We have no idea what kind of weapons the Zelrani have. There has to be a way to stop this, Alan insisted. Zethka doesn't want the harvest to happen. That's why he told me. Can we trust him? Darius asked. Before Alan could answer, the chamber wall dissolved. Zethka entered, alone. The final test begins, the alien announced. The High Command observes. The chamber transformed into a vast, empty space. A single object appeared in the center, a crystalline device pulsing with light. This is a resonance amplifier, Zethka explained. It can connect minds across great distances. The High Command believes human consciousness properly channeled might restore our reproductive resonance. How does it work? Alan asked. One of you must connect with it, Zethka said. Your consciousness will be amplified and broadcast to the waiting fleet. If the resonance is compatible, we will have our answer without the harvest. The humans exchanged wary glances. And if it's not compatible? Patricia asked. Then the fleet proceeds to Earth. Zethka replied simply. It's a trap, Darius said. Whoever connects will probably die. Death is possible, Zethka acknowledged. The process has never been attempted with non-Zelrani. Alan stepped forward. I'll do it. Alan, no. Patricia grabbed his arm. We don't know what it will do to you. I'm the logical choice, Alan said. You're a brilliant scientist, Patricia. Darius has military training. If anyone has a chance of escaping and warning Earth if this fails, it's you two. The engineer understands consequences, Zethka observed. Alan turned to the alien. Yes, I do. And I choose this consequence. But I want something in return. What? Zethka asked. If this works, if my consciousness helps your species, you leave Earth alone, forever, and you take Patricia and Darius home no matter what happens to me. Zethka's lights pulsed rapidly. I cannot promise for all Zelrani, but I will advocate for your terms with all my influence. Not good enough, Alan said firmly. I need your word. The alien was silent for a moment. You have it, Zethka finally said. The word of a speaker carries weight among my kind. Alan nodded and approached the crystalline device. How do I do this? Place your hands on the central node, Zethka instructed. Your mind will do the rest. Alan looked back at Patricia and Darius. If I don't make it, tell the captain I was doing my job, fixing what I could. He placed his hands on the cool crystal surface. Instantly, his mind exploded with sensation. He felt himself stretched thin, pulled in all directions at once. His consciousness expanded beyond his body, beyond the ship. Suddenly, Alan could sense the Zelrani fleet. Thousands of crystalline minds connected in perfect harmony. Their thoughts were alien but clear to him now. Calculated, precise, absolute. They saw the universe as a set of definite outcomes, each action leading inevitably to a single result. Alan pushed his human perspective into the network, the understanding that choices created branches of possibility, that consequences rippled outward in ways that couldn't always be predicted. He showed them how humans lived with uncertainty, how they made decisions without knowing all outcomes, how they accepted responsibility for unforeseen results. The Zelrani consciousness recoiled at first. The concept of true choice was foreign, to them almost painful. But Alan persisted, guiding them toward understanding. Then he felt something unexpected, a response from the crystals themselves. The ships weren't just vessels. They were extensions of the Zelrani, grown rather than built. And they were responding to his human consciousness in a way they never had to the Zelrani. Alan realized the truth in a flash of insight. The Zelrani, reproduction wasn't failing because of some biological flaw. It was failing because their perfect, calculated existence had reached its limit. They couldn't evolve further without embracing uncertainty, without learning to choose. With all his remaining strength, Alan pushed this understanding into the crystalline network. Choice creates consequences. Consequences create growth. Growth creates life. The resonance amplifier beneath his hands began to glow brighter. The crystal sang with a clear, pure note that seemed to vibrate through the universe itself. Then everything went white. When Alan opened his eyes, he was lying on the floor of the chamber. Patricia and Darius knelt beside him, concern on their faces. Did it work? He asked weakly. See for yourself. Patricia helped him sit up. The wall of the chamber was transparent, showing the vast expanse of space outside. The Zelrani fleet was visible, but it was changing. The crystalline ships were growing, sprouting new formations that glittered with rainbow light. Zethka stood nearby, its own crystalline body transformed. New growths extended from its surface, catching light in complex patterns Alan had never seen before. What's happening to them? Darius asked. They're reproducing, Alan realized. They're evolving. Zethka approached. You have given us more than we sought, Alan Brooks. The consequence resonance we detected in humans is not a physical quality to be harvested. It is a perspective, a way of perceiving reality that embraces possibility rather than certainty. So Earth is safe? Patricia asked. Yes, Zethka confirmed. The fleet returns to Zelrani space. There will be no harvest. And us? Darius asked. As promised, you will be returned home, Zethka said. The journey begins now. As the Zelrani May ship changed course for Earth, Alan watched the transformed fleet disperse across the stars. His mind still echoed with the connection he had shared, the alien consciousness that had touched his own. They just needed to understand choice, he told Patricia and Darius. To understand that actions have consequences, and those consequences create new possibilities. And now they know what humans are made of, Patricia said. Alan nodded. Consequences. We're made of the choices we make and the consequences we bear. The journey home took 3 weeks. When the Zelrani ship approached Earth, they were met by a defensive fleet assembled during their absence. Tensions ran high until communications were established, and the 3 humans were confirmed alive and well. In the aftermath, Alan, Patricia, and Darius became humanity's ambassadors to the Zelrani. The aliens returned not as conquerors but as allies, eager to learn more about the species that had saved them from extinction, with a simple yet profound truth, that life thrives not on certainty, but on possibility. Years later, when a young engineer asked Alan what had happened aboard the alien vessel, he smiled and repeated the question that had started it all. What are you made of? The engineer asked. Consequences, Alan replied. We all are.